Thank you, Sebastian, for joining us on this latest episode of what we're going to be calling Build and Scale. We're going to be covering different aspects around the world of data and cloud and sort of digital transformation and everything that comes under that sort of umbrella. So today we're going to be speaking to you about AI ops. So we'll get you to explain what that is in a moment. But if you just want to do a short introduction about yourself and who you are, we'll take it from there.
Sure, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. You asked me last week, and really great opportunity to be involved in this series of talks that you're doing. So
no problem.
Again, the pleasure is definitely all mine. So as you said, I'm Sebastian. I've worked in technology and data for over 20 years. I have worked my way up from starting my career as a coder, being a database administrator, through to a project and technical project manager, to then leading transformation programs for the likes of HSBC. Most recently, I've had 2 roles within HSBC, the most recent being the delivery lead for the Google Cloud program across the data assets for the commercial bank. And before that, I was involved in the first of its kind proof of value for AIOPs within the financial crime and regulatory area of HSBC. So my career has spanned everything to do with data, from infrastructure, from insight to availability, to the latest version of AIOps, and then incorporating that around with transformation, insight, horizon technology, and always thinking forward and always basically seeing where we can leverage these new insights to offer more value to our customers.
Amazing. So as mentioned, today we're going to be talking about AI ops. And I guess, we'll just start off straight from the beginning. And what is AI ops?
No, it's a good question. It's like the mythbuster of many of the AI themes around. So AI ops, artificial intelligence over operations management. So it's applying artificial intelligence over your operational management. So let's split that into 2. Generally, most people know what AI is. And then we have the ops side with AI, and we have ops. If we think of ops are the systems that we use day in and day out to book flights from reservation companies, book hotels, or the systems that we use and transact with to complete our financial transactions on a daily basis. They're the operational systems, and these systems need to be up and running 24/7, 365 days of the year. Now, if you think about these systems, for majority of organizations, they were possibly, it generally isn't one system. They're multifaceted. They reside on different platforms. They have their own rules. They probably were delivered by different companies and created and delivered by different developers and different companies over the time. Now, all of these systems will have their own rules. They'll have their own alert system structure, and they will feed in and supply alerts to the operational management team at any one time, whether there's a problem, whether there's a warning. And AI Ops is going to sit over the top of that to give an overall insight of what's happening to a core network system, to the core operational systems at any one time. It will basically give the operational team insight into what's happening for the system and what's happening to the system and what they can do to eradicate behavior and also improve the availability of that system.
Right. And why is it needed? What is? I mean, you've touched on some points there, but why is it needed? What's the use of it, and how does it work exactly?
Why is it needed? Well, due to the complexity of the landscape of IT systems at the moment, as I was alluding to earlier, there's so many different systems. We want to make things easy for the IT operations team. Those guys are in the trenches. They're looking at alerts and the thousands of different alerts that come in daily, from BMC patrol system to network switches to database alerts to threshold alerts to application server alerts. The main thing is when the CTO comes down into the operations team and says this is not working, the ops guys need to know where to look and fast, and they need to be able to get the system up and running and make it available to customers. In addition to that, they need to look at the information and look at the logs that have basically been generated weeks, months, and years, and be able to adequately size and use their systems to service the needs of their customers so they don't actually have an outage. It's enabling. Using AIOps is going to enable you to predict the different states that your system should be basically preempted and delivered for. It should be sized correctly for instance, month-end system or batch-end processes. It should be sized correctly for massive outages or massive spikes. So these big occurrences don't actually happen. It's predicted.
So it obviously sounds like it's very useful for big complex systems, big data structures. Is there a use for AI ops in SMEs and smaller companies?
Definitely. If you're, I would not even. Well, there's always a challenging question whether you go straight into AI or basically you go into just digital insights and data and analytics. If your data and analytics structure is set up correctly, you may question the need for AI ops, or you may delve further down into insights and automation. That being said, if you're an SME and you're a small team and you have a couple of hundred employees that are working for the company, and your infrastructure team is going to be relatively small, you again want to empower that ops person or that ops team to be able to deliver what they need to do for the business at any one time. So a company with only 5 websites and they're housing their data locally, and they're possibly not using the cloud, still could benefit from having the information, the insight that AIOps can give them.
Is there a certain structure or infrastructure or approach that any company should have when looking at ops, when looking at AI ops rather?
The approach and structure, that's a really good question. It really depends on the value add. I mean, I generally believe that there's a huge value add that AIOps can give to the bottom line, which is company reputation for not actually having the systems go down in the first place. Time for operations managers to react and know where to react to the certain problems, server, application server, and so on and so forth. But then in addition to that, I think if you're looking out and you're looking forward, there's also the cost of running teams, which can possibly be reduced. So the return on investment can really drive you forward into looking at AIOps as a solution.
So you mentioned there about the cost and the cost of running teams, and AIOps providing a solution to that. Is that in a way saying that this could take away the need for manual labour in this area going forward?
No, I definitely wouldn't think that would be the case. I think you can use AIOps to optimize your team, and I think you can use AIOps to basically predict further forward. I mean, if you have a large network team and you're deploying AIOps, which is basically then seeing where your problems are and looking at and using native text to analyze your different systems and providing different solutions to the problems that you may have. Yes, it will give you insight as to possibly do you need as many people in your support team. I still am the believer in the person sat at the support desk and has been in that support team for a number of years will possibly always know where to look first, as opposed to a system learning another system to give you an answer for that system. Yeah. So human thought for me is still key and required. But this is going to, I would see AIOps as an automated member of your toolkit, or an automated member of your team, which you can turn to as possibly backing up your thought process in the midst of that 2 a.m. call where your database has gone down, and also support some of the changes and some of the implementations and strategies that you are going to deploy to get your system back up.
So that sort of brings you on quite nicely to my next question in terms of machine learning.
Sure.
How strong a part will machine learning play in the future of AIOps? I mean, I guess it's the answer's almost in the title, but where do you see it going in terms of machine learning, and how strong would it play a part?
Machine learning and looking at native text and the different streams of AI that are out there are as strong or are going to be as pertinent as the information that you give those applications and processes. Right. So if you have a vast data lake that you're able to deploy towards the AI tool, which the AI tool, for instance, can then go and investigate and ingest and analyze, that will then be able to helpfully predict the future outcomes for you. It's going to have a huge element, and that's going to be totally dependent upon. I believe it's totally dependent on the applications that you feed into the AIOps tool. If you have a huge data lake, the AIOps tool will be able to analyze the data lake to make future predictions on possible outages, possible stresses on the system. So that is a part of machine learning. So the more information that you give to the AIOps tool through machine learning, the better predictions and the better steps that you can basically move to go forward to alleviate these outages. So yes, it's a core component.
So if we're looking at a company and they've got no AIOps in place, maybe they're on the digital transformation journey, it's going to be quite, a broad question, and maybe you won't be able to answer it in a short space of time. But where does a company look to first in terms of either bringing AIOps on, outsourcing it, just developing that operation? Who does it begin with?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I mean, it always starts with the network and infrastructure estate, and you'll be looking to talk to network engineers within that team to say, okay, what do you guys need? There's no point in deploying a tool which no one's going to use. You would then look at possibly what's being generated, where are their pain points. You could then, I would think, the next step would be go to data and analytics, because data and analytics, if deployed rightly, could possibly alleviate the need for AIOps. If the DNA strategy or the data and analytics strategy is deployed correctly, you could then move forward to saying, okay, we need further insight, we need further predictive insight, and we need that help. We need that digital team member to do some of the legwork for us, to look at our rules, to look at our events, to help us basically tune our rules and events to ensure that we're not being called out at 3 o'clock in the morning by our BMC patrol servers to basically just fix really simple things. So there's definitely steps in which you can go through. I think a lot of companies at the moment are jumping to AIOps because obviously it's very popular and it's on the Gartner report and it has been for a few years. Mm-hmm. But I think definitely foundational steps to see whether you actually need it and if it's going to give you that ROI, because it's not cheap, but it's very valuable.
So is it literally just like, the high-level strategy team sitting down and trying to answer questions about what value they need to be looking at, or what value they need to pull out, or insights they need, and then going out and trying to deploy something that will answer those questions for them?
Sure. I wouldn't. No. I mean, you would have a strategy for your infrastructure, for instance, where you want to be on-prem or you want to be on cloud. There'll be sadly, there's always a cost associated with tech. So there's going to be a cost associated with the team, purchasing license and tools in the team. So it's all going to be wrapped up. It's not just a case of, do we need to deploy AIOps? I mean, some people may be lucky enough just to be able to answer that core question. But for me, it's the whole ecosystem of how you see your infrastructure estate and how you feel your teams are going to be able to get the best out of these tools for them. Because ideally, the whole aim is to detect problems before they happen, to react to those problems before they happen, to keep your systems up and running, and to keep them accessible to your customers. That's what everybody wants. With the landscape of digital technology increasing exponentially on a week-by-week basis, it's generally quite hard for some of the operational team to keep a very strong eye on everything that's basically happening in their estate. So they definitely need help. If that helps your team, then yes, it's the right investment. If it's going to give you the insight to stop outages, it's going to be the right investment.
Excellent. So obviously you're very experienced in this area and you've been in it for a while. What small advice would you give to someone who's looking to build a career in this area?
Oh, that's a good question.
In terms of what route do you think this person should go down if they're going to become an expert in this area? What route would be best for them?
Well, it depends on data and infrastructure. I've had a career obviously which has gone from coding, DBA, technical project management, and so on and so forth. is there one way in which to be an AI consultant? Do you want to basically be in the weeds? I think some of the operators that I've worked with and the companies that I've worked with have been absolutely amazing, and they're basically totally ripe for retraining into AIOps. And that's from just being from the service desk, because it would their service desk insight, the knowledge base of what they have in their head, and then giving them actionable insight and future insight to pivot into this space. You can be from a data science background, computer science background, maths background. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't really say there's any ideal route, because is there an ideal route to be a CTO? It's very, very varied. So, but I would basically say that data, understanding of data and how it moves around the system, system is key. So a core foundation in computing would help. And then obviously you're going to be building on that, and depending on whatever stream you go down, whether it's obviously neural network text or machine learning, or so on and so forth, you're going to be using those strands, which would only aid you in an AIOps career.
Sure. And finally, can you provide just a couple of insights into where you see the future of AIOps? If we're looking 3, 5, maybe even 10 years down the line, I know the world would be a completely different place by then, but
I totally believe there's just going to be more integration. At the moment, this is AIOps, so it's very much focused on operations. But there's a number of different hurdles and walls on which it can go over. I know there's AIOps tools at the moment that obviously are monitoring web servers and so on and so forth, but this is very much behind that wall. We go over the wall and we start to insight in the actual data it's actually seeing, and then you have, which I've been prevalent to in my time, if there's a 360-degree view of the customer. So how does the operations pertinent what's going on the front side of the of X system at X time for X user? My general belief is the adoption of AIOps within many sectors is just going to increase the level of insight to be connected to more systems. There's a lot of systems definitely within finance that can't go onto the cloud. So there's always a hybrid model of what's going to be deployed on the cloud and what's going to be deployed on-prem, bringing those systems together to give that insight.
Is that sorry to interrupt, is that because of security issues?
Some security systems, some systems cannot be housed by a network provider. They can't be housed in a data lake. Certain companies and operations like, listen, we have our own data center and it doesn't leave. And then yes, you have regulatory commitments, especially in the banking sector, where information cannot be made available. No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for taking the time again to speak to us about AIOps today. Very insightful. I'll admit I'm pretty new to it, and so I'm learning from speaking to you as well. And it's really interesting. So thank you.
No, thanks for having me. There's a lot of great content out there, and some great podcasts which I use to keep me up to date on what's going on with the AIOps. So the automation podcast on Spotify was brilliant. The AIOps podcast on Spotify is also brilliant. So yeah, happy to share any resources that I use to keep me up to spec on what's happening in the industry.
Great. No. I mean, we'll share those as well when we put this out, and we'll probably put some links to it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Adrian.